the SPARC Network, and this session is called The Art of Performance. On my left, we have Jack Langenhuizen, who is one of the artistic directors of Motus Theater. And on my right, we have Jowi Taylor, who is bon vivant, and the creator, designer, inspiration, and many things of the six-string nation guitar.
I call it the progenitor. The progenitor.
Progenitor, I love that. My first exposure to Jowi was on CBC. He had one of the best radio shows that I just really enjoyed that.
Thanks.
So really wonderful stories about the world and music and that. Jack has been involved in with Motus O for a long time. And I love this national figure skater. That's
gotta start somewhere.
That goes back a ways. I think with creating 14 full productions, touring all over Canada, North America, small towns, big towns, on the street, and their story today is beyond the performance. So that's enough of me. And who's going first?
Thank you, Brian. I'll take it. Yeah,
okay.
We'll discuss that.
They're going to yak for about 20 minutes each, and then open it up to questions from the group.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for coming, first of all. And as Jim mentioned, one of the co-artistic directors, James back there, and his wife Cynthia. We started the company in 1990. We didn't really know what we were doing. We all got into a room with a couple other dancers and said, "So, what do you want to do?" We knew a couple things, and one particularity that stood out, and I think has stayed with us over our 28-year career so far, was about communication. So we all knew we came from different backgrounds of study, from theater, music, dance, mime, and one thing we really wanted to do was communicate, and I think that has always stuck with us. I think all of our work has demonstrated some kind of communication. We have done everything from young adults, we were commissioned to do an Alice in Wonderland. We've done a Midsummer Night's Dream with Shakespeare director, having her train us in speaking Shakespeare. And then we've gone to the other side where we've created our own contemporary work based on our own personal experiences. So the work that we have found, we didn't try to do this, it just was very wide ranging. I think James said it once, but he described us as we're like lightning, we never strike at the same place twice. And I think that's sort of with us. So when people ask me to describe us, I really don't know. My latest is we're Cirque du Soleil without the budget. That's the closest I can make a comparison to at the moment. So, but the communication, I think that has spilled out, and it not only spilled out into our works, it has obviously since spilled out into our community engagement work that we're doing, which is why we're here, the type of community engagement work. I didn't know how much we did until James and I spent 7 hours in the truck and we were talking about it. We didn't need to spend 7 hours talking about it, but I realized again there's a big range of what we've done. A lot of it, some of it planned, and some of it we just were asked to do things and we said yes and then figured it out later. Some were just people saw us the next steps for certain things we were doing. So I'm going to try to just give you a sort of an overview of the type of things we were doing. Please jot down if there's anything that strikes you or say, I don't want to know more about that, because I don't want to blab on and on about something that doesn't even relate to you. I'd rather you pick out something that I have brought up and then we can talk more details after. And of course I'm around for the next 24 hours or 14 hours or whatever, and you can always have one-on-ones. I'm totally available to talk about that. Okay, so sort of looking at, I said, James, there's sort of an overview that I was looking at, and there's such a variation in community engagement. But there's three things that I've sort of felt that they were based on, and the levels of engagement we can do. And I felt it was time, money, and skill level. And we'll talk about that more later, but the amount of time you're given and the amount of money you're given to spend the time to do the community engagement, and then skill level. If you're working with like we work with Cubs in Golden, BC, there wasn't a whole lot of skill level. So you are limited to the amount of community engagement work you can do versus, working at the local university there or college with the dance school. So we can spend more time developing something, but yes, the skill level is dependent, or your community engagement is dependent on the skill level. The types of workshops, I broke it down, I tried to break it into 3 categories. One was workshops for both youth and adults, not necessarily the same. The second was performance-related community engagements. And then we had a lot of miscellaneous, so I just called it other community engagements. The workshops, I think what we're most familiar with. Going into schools, doing workshops, teaching elementary school, high school, whatever, doing workshop in their classrooms, that type of thing. We did a lot with Learning Through the Arts, with the Royal Conservative Music, with the Learning Through the Arts program, where it was curriculum based. So we had to teach, using our art form, had to teach curriculum from grade 1 to grade 12, using dance. So we had to dissect our dance and then go in and teach that. So that's sort of the educational side. Then the last part of the last few years, we've done a lot with social service organizations in terms of workshops. We've done seniors homes. We've worked with hospice, so people who are dying, as well as people who are caregivers. We've worked with aphasia, people with strokes, and again, people who have strokes, as well as the caregivers. Kids with autism and Parkinson's. So those are the social service organizations that we've been doing a lot of community development work with, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years. Then the performance-related models, I think, community integrated performance experience. So those of you who've maybe seen Alice in Wonderland or Our Christmas Carol, we actually take community performers, we audition them, and then we get them parts and we train them within hours. And then they don't do walk-on parts, but we try to stick them in the scene. So it's very integrated. And so we develop and give them an opportunity to work with professionals. So it's not just about the role that they play in the show, it's about the experience of working with professionals in the rehearsal hall. And it's really fascinating to watch that their level of where they're at raises, because the bar has been raised automatically. So they're not just doing it with their peers doing a skit. They're also with these people who are doing amazing things, and they're like, oh, and I find that their performance level just naturally, they raise their own bar. So it's a very cool community engagement for that. So that's integrated performance experience. Also under performance, creating a performing theme-oriented works. So we've been asked to do we've done shows that are one acts, and we've asked to go into studios and we've done themes with them, and then they create short pieces and then do this as a pre-show, like the warm-up band. So we've done a lot of that in communities where they get the community to actually create something through our direction, and then we'll often get them as pre-show pieces. And again, mostly with one act shows. So the audience is there for 3 hours. And one group we just did in Golden, BC, where they actually had their youth create something. Our show was One Hit Wonders. We took all of our commissionings and put them in a show. And the youth created a work with us over 2 days. A videographer came in, edited it, and we showed that to start the show. So even doing that kind of community involvement with the kids on video. And then training others to do a repertoire. We've gone and we did a high school in Parry Sound, and we went and took one of our simpler pieces, and we actually got the school kids to do it with our dancers. So we actually trained them in one of our contemporary pieces. And we've done them, it doesn't matter about what their skill level is. We were given a drama class. They weren't dancers, we were a dance theater company, but they gave us a drama class, and they were very challenging. And we just adapt the choreography, of course. And the people who saw it at the end of the performance were blown away, because A, they were a challenging class, and they knew the kids. And B, I think one of the kids at the end of it, he had a big purple mohawk, and he was like, shit, I didn't think I could do this stuff. And he was like, this is what he was telling the audience at the end. So they didn't know what they could do. And I think the buzz of having the lights and the audience there at a professional performance just blew them away. And I thought that was so cool. It's like, yeah, again, we're not looking at their skill level. Oh, well, he wasn't quite, he was told, we don't care about that. It's about getting them to experience it. And for those that are really arts oriented, that gives them a chance to, I didn't find out about the arts till I left high school. I didn't do anything in the arts. So, but once you drop into it, it's like, I relate to this, maybe it'll be a career in it, or maybe there'll be a big art supporter. I don't know, but it's a positive experience for these kids. And then other, we went into the full week residency in Golden, BC again. They had this big event annually they called Mask Parade, And they gave us a theme, and we worked with the local pubs, dance studios, youth circus group, an adult circus group, 3 elementary schools, and they told us what the theme of the big parade was, and we had to go in and create something on all these kids in a week, and then they were going to do this big community presentation. And then we went to Powell River, BC, and basically did something different, but similar, but it was called What Kids Think. And then we took high school classes, and we spent a week with them, and they sort of wrote their scripts, and then we created dance work. So some of them spoke monologues while dance was happening with that. But again, spending a week with them in the schools, and then created their own performance piece at the end. So that was another fun event. Community commissions, we did the Pan Am Games. Again, we were asked to involve the local community. So we worked with different organizations and found youth and adults to be a part of a Pan Am piece that we were supposed to launch for that. So again, these are all these little opportunities that you don't really foresee when you're going into a career in the arts. You think you're doing a stage presentation and then find yourself in all these interesting areas. We've done flash mobs, and I think, art galleries. We did an improvisation with some art galleries where they had new artwork, contemporary artwork. So we went in and we did it with young people, and we went and talked about the artwork, and then of course, dance is all about line and shape. And that's what we did. So we had them interpret the line and shape, and then we put music on, and they would interpret movement. We'd give them some tools, and then they just did an improvisational piece for those that came to see the artwork and that type of thing. So anyway, hopefully that's a nutshell. I know it was really quick, but if there's anything in there that you want more information on, we can get to that after we've all had a chance to sort of say what we do. But no shortage on community involvement. I think it's usually time and money. If people had time and money, we would be out there full time doing this stuff because it's so brilliant. And I think the experiences that we've witnessed working with stroke victims was phenomenal. And the caregivers, I mean, the response after a 3-year project working with them, it was just like, things that you'll never be the same as the artist. Forget about them, but you won't, because it's so powerful. So I think the whole idea of community engagement is so powerful. So, Joey, thank you.
All right, thank you, Jack. So any expertise or experience that I have in this, I've completely backed into. I mean, how many of you know Just Extermination Project already? Okay, so it follows my tendency to think in collages. So 1995, I had this idea for this guitar, and I won't go into the big explanation of how that happened, but the idea was to create this guitar that was a collage of stories from across the country. So all of the bits of material that make up this guitar tell a story from different cultures and communities and characters and events from every province and territory of Canada. It's a rich and complex and deep idea, and it took 11 years to bring this thing to life, and it was a complete and total struggle, and the result was a very beautiful thing, and then created a whole new host of problems for me. So I was, as Jim was saying, I was a broadcaster, right? That was my audience, that was my art form for a decade, and now I had this thing, and I'm not a guitar player. I do not play guitar. So I had this instrument that tells stories, but it needs a voice to do that. And it was a compelling idea for a lot of people. Like, people kind of get that, well, that's a cool idea. Like, having this guitar that represents Canada in a way that isn't about Mounties and Tim Hortons, right? Like, this is nuanced, it's diverse, it's rich. But either that's got to happen through the artists who play it, and again, I'll repeat, not me, or it's going to happen some other way. And it became quickly apparent to me why I was going to have to take that on as my new art form, because in the first flush of the release of this thing, so we debuted on Canada Day on Parliament Hill in 2006 in front of 80,000 people. We got a lot of media, And here I was on all the breakfast television shows and the CBC News World shows and all that kind of stuff. And it was a disaster because what they all wanted to talk about, because they only have 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes, right? And what do they all want to know about? Paul Henderson's hockey stick, Pierre Trudeau's canoe paddle, Robert Richard's ring, maybe Nancy Green's ski, maybe the Blue Nose too. Those are all in there. That's not what this guitar is about. This guitar is about something else. It's about community. It's about these stories that happen in communities all across this country every day. And as I put it to the kids that I talk to in schools about this, I say, if you don't get good at telling your own story, someone tells it for you. And that's where advertisers step in to that vacuum, and they define you as you're a hockey fanatic, you're a donut eater, you are all these things. And again, I don't mind if that's your thing, that's great. But when we don't practice our voice in telling these stories amongst ourselves, we lose that muscle. So the idea of this project was to, flex this muscle for everybody as a conversation, and that wasn't happening because I would have these 3 minutes on TV where the impression that was left was, oh, I get it, it's a collection of hockey sticks. That's what it's about. And that was antithetical to what I had set out to do. And then it was almost made worse by the fact, not worse, but maybe more difficult in that the first year, my main community outreach was the festival circuit. So I would I did all the big festivals the first year, Mariposa and where else was it? Winnipeg and Vancouver and Edmonton and all those big festivals. And what I was left with doing was we would have a tent where my photographer was there. We do portraits of people. We've now done 150,000 portraits of 15,000 different people holding this guitar in every province and territory of Canada. And I had some interpretive materials set up there, and people would come by, and some of them would say, "What's this? You're raffling it off?" And I would say, "No." And then I would explain what it was, and by the end of the day, I was hoarse. And people wanted to know about Rocket Richard's ring and Paul Henderson's hockey stick. And so I was basically saying the same things over and over and over. And so it wasn't doing me any good, it wasn't doing the project any good. And I was starting to get some interest from teachers and community groups and stuff like that. And so I developed a multimedia presentation to tell the story of this guitar in all its diversity and all its nuance. And I became an expert in Keynote, the Apple presentation software, to the extent that a person from Apple said, "Wow, you're an expert in this. I have nothing to teach you." But then it's like, okay, well, how do I then, do this work that I think is really important, sharing this story and inspiring people's sense of ownership. The whole idea is that I want everybody in the country to feel that this is their guitar. And I want to have the opportunity for people to hold that guitar and be pictured with it and make music on it and all those things. So, well, how do I go about doing that? So I come up with this show that has what we call a performance pocket built into it. And that performance pocket can be filled by a ringer if someone wants to bring in a famous artist to juice up the event for that moment. That's great, but I really encourage people to recruit from their own ranks, from their own community. And that means we've heard some amazing music, and I think of this extraordinary, it was brought out by the Black Gold School District in Alberta outside of Edmonton. And 15-year-old transgender student who played the guitar as part of that performance pocket, who did original music, and the best young songwriter I've ever encountered in this little community. And that, to me, this speaks of the volume of diversity that you can bring into this project. But it means I still have this problem where, okay, I am a storyteller, and I think a lot of people think the guitar is the project. But the guitar is just a guitar. I mean, without me to tell its story, it's just a guitar. And invariably, a musician without benefit of me telling the story beforehand, will make some joke about, yeah, apparently it's got, you know, they'll make up, it's got Second City's, you know, whatever in it. Ha ha ha, everybody laughs. So I have to, you know, build this whole thing around it. So here's what we do. At festivals, we still do festivals from time to time. But what I insist on now is basically on the Friday night of the festival, I need 10 minutes on the main stage. You need jumbotrons. I can't do this without the jumbotrons. I do the presentation. Somebody comes out, one of the festival artists comes out and plays the guitar as part of that. And then we say, for the rest of the weekend, we're going to be over in that tent over there doing portraits. They're free. We send them to you after the event, and those become a memento of your time at the festival. And then they'll build a workshop around me some other time during the weekend where I get to do the full presentation, or maybe it's a songwriter's circle and a bunch of different artists will play it. And that's worked on any number of stages across the country, large festivals, small festivals, so we do this quite a bit. Although that has fallen off somewhat, I would say, over the years. Schools have become the kind of bread and butter for what I do. I typically say grades 5 and up is what's appropriate to hear this story. It deals with residential schools, so I need to, it used to be that I didn't want to freak out the grade 4s and 5s who might not have begun to learn about that yet. But in fact, that's been a really good thing in the last couple of years. I've noticed more and more teachers say that that lesson is starting in grade 3 and 4, so that's encouraging. But what's really neat about that is that teachers, I mean, I do provide some resource material that teachers can use. There's an online activity from ArcGIS from Esri Canada. It's a mapping software that all schools in Ontario are licensed for. And the kids can build maps of the guitar, they can build maps of their own experience as it relates to the guitar, they can create a new instrument. These are all sort of digital tools that we can use for that. But, you know, I've been to schools where the 15-year-old who plays the guitar in the performance pocket at the end, the teachers come up to me afterwards and they say, that was amazing. We could not reach that kid. He had no way into curriculum. And he just came to life. All of a sudden he's interested in these things because they're in the shape of this thing that he's really interested in or she's really interested in. So schools have done mural projects and they've done, I've shown up at schools and there's been, you know, crystal board projects, festooning the hallways. All kinds of kids have done their Heritage Fair projects on the guitar and won prizes. Lucas Hung there and Abby from Saskatchewan. But you know, and they send me these things. I'm totally proud. Like, it's just amazing when that happens. Seniors residences, again, it's so interesting because when you're talking about all these stories, and this happened last night. We did a presentation at the Miners, and there was a group of people there who were prospecting for cobalt in the area, and there is a piece of material on the strap. It's from the Vancouver Asahi, which was a Japanese-Canadian baseball team founded in 1914. Then when the internment of the Japanese came in the Second World War, the team was dispersed. Everything was lost except for this jersey that wound up in the collection of the Japanese-Canadian Cultural Center in Toronto. I got a piece of material from that jersey. It's now on the strap. And last night, in Cobalt, Ontario, one of the prospectors came up to me and said, one of the guys in the picture of that team is my great uncle.
Wow.
Right? This happens to me all the time. And when you go into a senior's residence, and here's some, and I mentioned, you know, we've got, there's a little ulu carved by Charlene Watt, an artist from Kuujjuaq, made from caribou antler, soapstone rivets. It's in the 5th fret. And at a senior's residence, a woman clearly struggling with Alzheimer's came up and said, and she opened up her sweater, and there's a T-shirt that says Nunavik. She connected in that way. And these connections happen all the time in different communities, because there's so many different communities represented in the guitar that you're bound to touch on something. So I'm with the National Speakers Bureau for my corporate stuff. It's great. They pay me really well. I like to say I make $5,500 an hour, 3 times a year. So I can't make a living out of it. It's tantalizing because the money's great, and it's, you know, they fly out and put you in a nice hotel, and it's really terrific. And then I spend the rest of my year like waiting for the phone to ring or trying to get the phone to ring. And it's a complicated thing because people, for instance, will say, how can I get you to come out to Bashaw, Alberta, to the public library? I'll say, well, there's my fee, and there's the flight, and then there's a rental car from Edmonton, and there's accommodation, and there's all that kind of stuff, and you're the Bashaw Public Library. How are you fixed for cash? and it's difficult, but what has built out of this is I can say, well, here's the thing. Don't bring me out for one presentation. Bring me out for 4 days. Mm-hmm. And let me go to several schools, seniors residence, Native Friendship Center. Is there a corporate client that wants an inspirational talk? All these things. Is there a community concert that we can do? Once you weave all those things together, then the impact is huge, and everyone feels it. It's part of the community in diverse ways. This is not a planned slideshow. I just happened to have this here, so I'm running it. But this is a thing we did with the Windsor Symphony Orchestra, where they built a whole program around the story, around my narration. I'm on stage delivering the narration with the symphony orchestra, 17 local guitar players playing with the Windsor Symphony, including students, like for their first time on stage, backed by the symphony. Just a remarkable experience for everyone involved. And Kevin Kloss, whom you might have seen here, he's at SPARC, came up to do his incredible acoustic rendition about Canada at the end of every performance. We did 4 performances with the Windsor Symphony. We did outreach with them at the local mall and school shows and all that kind of stuff. There's the Bashaw example. But there's one, that one was really done because there was a very dedicated librarian who wanted this to happen, and she whipped the school into shape and local B&B and all that kind of stuff. And we made that happen. The other one, though, that's really been extraordinary for me is the Community Foundations of Canada. So I had spoken at their annual conference one year, and then all kinds of the local community foundations wanted to get involved. The sort of gold standard for that one was the Lethbridge and Southwest Alberta Community Foundation. They had me out to Southwestern Alberta for 14 days. I did 12 schools in 10 days. We did a community concert, we did seniors residences, an in-store appearance, a club night, all those things. And for the Community Foundation, this was them showing the community the work that they were doing in the community. They handled the grant, they assisted the schools to bring me in. But it means that the burden is shared amongst, you know, a lot of different people, and I do okay, and it's great. In terms of the sort of a community driven one, the gold standard is right here in this area. Where Pied Piper Kids shows. The other thing is back in 2014, they sent, in advance of my arrival, they sent 3 different artists into area schools. So Bonnie Cucci and her daughter Beneji Kwe Cucci, who are on either end of the picture there, they went into the reserve school in Notre Dame du Nord over on the Quebec side there. And they worked with those kids for a week doing songwriting based on telling their own story through this guitar that was going to be coming into the community. Cindy Dwyer, originally from Timmins, now in Toronto, she worked in the French school in Hailbury, and Kevin Kloss worked at New Liskeard Public School, and they all did songwriting workshops with the students. I came in, I did a presentation for each of those schools, and then I think it was on the Saturday night, there was a concert at the Classic Theatre in Cobalt. All the parents, the families of those kids came to watch their kids in the performance pocket part of the presentation do their thing. So that was kind of the gold standard of how to make this work on a community level. Everybody is involved, everybody's story gets told, everybody feels a sense of ownership over the... So that's, I think that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Wow. Paul, He's the local guy.
I'm not sure what I can really add.
What you do for community outreach here? And
Yeah, so as a business in the area, we're a bookstore, we're a cafe, we're a gaming store. So what we can offer is just offering a place for stuff like this, right? You guys have a spot for a seminar today. Peter's mother, who's a local artist, we've actually done workshops where she can come in, and what's been nice is they've done, which is it's a big thing right now, is sort of the paint and sips. But we've offered a different one where it's sort of a coffee one and sip. So we've had some younger audiences that have come out that didn't want to go to the bars, but can come over to this one, and then they basically, you sit down with a real artist, you have a chance to do do a painting and actually get some work done. We also do storytelling in the store in the sense of D&D, where we have other stuff like that going, and we do author events in coffee houses and stuff. So as an artist, the only thing I can really say is that if you guys are looking for a smaller venue or something like that, just approach a bookstore or a cafe and just see if they have a space like this, and then we're usually always willing to have people in and do stuff. So that's all I can really add, unless you guys have any questions. So, yeah.
I love this space. It's like they said, what's back there? And you're winding back and back. Where are we going?
Downstairs. In the back.
That's great. Wow, what great stories, and we traveled a long way in a very quick time with both of you. And so I'm going to ask one question because I get that prerogative, and then I'll open it for other questions. And so a lot of what you do, though, Jack, I heard you talking about working with one group for 3 years, so that's extraordinary. But a lot of what you do is you come into a community, you do these phenomenal things, and then you're gone again. And just sort of the reflection on that, sort of coming in, sparking something and leaving versus actually being in a community and being involved in animating that community over a long period of time. Maybe I'll just throw that open-ended question, and since we just heard from you, Joey, we'll go from Jack and then Joey.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny you actually say that because we just spoke about this, the 3 directors last week. So this is very fresh for us as we're sort of looking at the other part of our career and sort of reflecting back, what have we done over 30 years, and the lasting effect. And I have to say, there's actually one frustration I think all 3 of us felt, and I'll use sort of the 3-year grant. We've done a few 3-year projects within a specific area, working with people that, and I'll for example, with the aphasia, with the stroke organization, working with people over 3 years, doing workshops. It culminated in, it was a digital story project. So we actually had a videographer come do interviews. So some of them who couldn't speak because of their strokes, they had books, binders with pictures, and so you go through a very slow process with the caregiver, and you find out, it was to find out who they were, who are you, what's their story, and people from our age right through to elderly. And so the whole process was that, we did workshops on them in movement, and then combine them all. They got little DVDs of little bios that they could take home and show their families. A lot of grandparents, we were finding out a lot of grandkids story were, I didn't know about that about grandpa. I didn't know because they don't talk to them because they can't speak. So that opened up a whole new conversation with people. And then it was also about how effective was movement to help the stroke people to rewire their brains with continuity and repetition and that. So it was quite explorative that way. Anyways, it was culminated into a final production where we incorporated people with strokes into the show, as well as did pieces, the stories that we gathered. And it was just an amazing, Jane Philpott was there, the mayor came, and it was just a phenomenal evening. Next steps. Technically, when you go into these long projects, you have the next steps. However, the lady, and this is probably true with you, it's the champions in the communities that make residencies and that happen. And it's usually one person who's just got the drive for it and makes it all happen. And this lady just retired. And so now we have this whole body of work and exploration that we want to take to the next level, which actually was a research paper. And get funding for that, and now it's no one's, we don't have time for that. The new director, we'll look into it. Yeah, I heard it was phenomenal. And so it's just sort of like, now what? So yes, the experience, the people, I mean, that's invaluable, what they experience, but why can't these things continue? And again, it seems like when the champion leaves, and this is just one example of numerous I could sit here and talk about, that's where the disappointment is. It's like, how can we sustain this? And it all comes down, again, money, because we can do the work, but the teachers need fund, they need to be paid. And all this was supported through a funding model, through Trillium actually. And, but yeah, it's the next steps that's really frustrating. So I don't have an answer for that. I would love for there to be one, and I would love for some of these projects to have a much larger life. They may, grow legs again and run, but again, if you don't have the champion there. But I just see some amazing residencies and stuff that should go on or be passed, the baton passed on. We've talked about training other people in communities to take over where we started. And again, that gets as far as, and then the people disappear.
Joey?
Well, I mean, there's a whole, we were talking earlier about how sometimes I'll show up at a school and it's pretty clear when I get in there that I am the guy on Friday afternoon who's going to take the kids off their hands. Like, that's why I'm there. This is great fun for the kids, and they're gonna mark papers in the corner while the kids are watching me, and that's fine too. And others, you can tell where it's more involved, and they've clearly been through all the materials with the students in advance. They've been on the website, they've been on Wikipedia, they've done all that stuff. Some of them it's going to be mural projects and whatever. So there's that kind of range. In terms of other kind of legacy projects, I mean, I had pitched a very, very involved and rich thing that involved mentorship and songwriting and community activities for Canada 150, and I didn't get that many. And that would have involved recordings and then a package at the end that would have been spectacular and all that kind of stuff. But if that didn't happen, and you dream big on these things, right there. And then you watch a giant rubber duck floating around Toronto Harbor, or the red couch going across the country for $162,000. Don't get me started. So that's super frustrating. But there are other things that you have that I have no control of that totally delight me. So, for example, as you can imagine, it's a bit of a nightmare flying with this guitar that is completely irreplaceable. And things go like this with Air Canada, where they actually sponsor me for the first year, and I would get greeted at the airport, Mr. Taylor, and they would escort me onto the plane. It was great. And then they abandoned that, and then I had to basically argue my way onto the plane with the guitar every time. Sometimes, okay, fine, I'll let it go with the strollers, but I am not checking this guitar. I am just not doing it. And on one of my flights, I was trying to get the guitar on the plane, and the pilot shows up behind me and he says to me, "Don't you realize what this guitar is? It's coming up with me." And he put it in his locker. And that pilot, Scott, I can't remember his last name, started making an airplane out of pieces of history. Like a wooden plane. And he goes, "There's an amazing legacy project that had nothing to do with me, other than that clearly that was something he inspired by me." And there have been other, somebody mentioned to me, I don't know if you heard about the Francophone, it's supposed to be a Franco-Ontarian guitar that somebody was trying to build.
There's a tree, I remember, this is going back, we were in Barrie before we opened the store, and there was pieces from all over Canada, like there was like a tricycle in it, and there was like, was like a full-blown tree.
So this was the Canada tree, it was the
Yeah.
project of Tyler Aspen. Tyler, yeah, I know,
Sure, he
right?
wasn't
different kind, Tyler Birch. He actually got started later than I did, but he got finished way faster than I did. And I figured we would be friends. We would have a lot to talk about. And he was struck by lightning in a cabin in the Laurentians. It came down, he was in the sauna, and lightning hit the exhaust pipe and went through the moisture in the air, and he was killed. So his parents gave me one of the mallets that he used to build his sculpture tree, and it's in the guitar. Those are the two things I have. Yes, thank you for reminding me of Tyler. And we have great fortunes with his family. But so, you know, in terms of the education piece, one of the challenges in Canada is that education is a provincially administered thing, and there are different curricula landmarks across the country. And I'm one person. I have no office. I have no, expertise in any of that. So it's sort of a crapshoot. You send out and you hope that there's enough in there that will relate to curriculum that they can use it in some way. Just scattershot. But I am, working with Imagine Ed, the Imaginative Education Research Group out at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. They're kind of intrigued by the project, and we are working together, or will be working together over the coming months to develop some more concrete materials that we can leave with teachers in all parts of the country that are inquiry-based learning and that kind of stuff, which the project really lends itself to. It's a matter of finding a way that works for everyone.
Great. I'm sure there's other questions here. Myra?
I have many questions, but I will limit myself just to give space. I'm interested specifically about the hospice work, that working with both people who are dying and the caregivers. So if you can share a little bit more about that. And I'm also interested in the proactive, reactive balance between thinking about what you would love to do and then finding the funding and doing that, to people coming to you and saying, can you do this? And we've got money to pay you. And I don't know if you end up doing more one than the other, or you would like the balance to be different. I'm curious about that.
Yeah. I think the second question, yes, we would like the balance to be much more. It seems like most of the projects we do outside of the general workshops, in schools and the one-offs, the 2 hours here, the 1 hour there, most of the larger residency programs that we've done, about half, 2/3 of them, I guess, I have to go and find the funding. So it's sort of an inspiration between, sometimes like the aphasia was the lady from that organization came to me. She says, I know the work your company done, I've seen you guys in action. This would be a perfect fit for our clients. So it's like, okay, so we don't really know. So she opened up a whole new doorway. There was something that we did called Moving Stories. James, Cynthia, and I were hired by the Banff Center and to do the animation in some of the leadership programs for corporate leaders over 5 years. So we did about 2 or 3. Nice paycheck, lovely accommodations twice a year, but it was still wonderful to do. And we were the animators as part of a team to get them to actually execute all leadership skills through movement, which freaked most of them out, but most of them didn't have any idea what we were doing anyways until and then realized they were actually dancing, and they got scared that they enjoyed it. Yeah, exactly. Oh no! But it's programs like that. So the Moving Stories started there, where we were getting people to talk about their problems at work and what results they wanted to find. What was the results they wanted to find? So they would talk about it, and we would have a team of dancers who would actually improvise that story that they just told back to them, and then we would have a classical musician or pianist doing the music, and they would be improvising what we're doing. So it's sort of like a 2-minute piece that we're doing, and then we would sit and talk about what they saw. Most of them, it's just, what was interesting is it's an improvisation piece. So we're not being true to all the details, of course, but we're still getting the essence. And we actually had one lady from the US work for a big corporation say, I came here to make a decision about something and I just saw my answer. I mean, that's a rare, right? I mean, I'm giving you sort of like, and you're like, oh, okay. But because we're doing it in a 3D, giving them a 3D perspective of their situation, they're seeing it differently. They're not thinking about it, they're not talking about it, it's now a visual, and it's giving them almost like an outside objective. So we took that model, and someone came to us from the Banff Center and said, I'm doing something with death and dying, would you be interested in doing this with hospice? And of course, as we always say, yeah, of course. Well, so what does that mean? So we did it, and it was the same thing. That we were taking people's stories, we were improvising them back to them, and then we were talking about them. So, and I'm not allowed to say it was like dance therapy, but it was dance therapy. I figure I have a psychology degree, so that, and a dance, that allows me to use that term, even though they're not saying, well, you're not actually a therapist. Well, a therapist is a person listening and talking. So, but that's what we were doing. So we were bringing it to people who were actually in hospice. A lot of it was, again, working with the nurses and doctors who on the empathy side. And one of the biggest funders for this, believe it or not, was 100 Women Who Care. Supported. You put your project in, and I think they raised $7,000 from that project. And they said, here's the money, go do what you need to do. So we arranged with the local hospice, work in the actual hospice, and then did some outside work in a couple hospitals, that kind of work. And again, it's just amazing, like it's just the outcomes of it are way beyond that. People are just seeing things from a very different perspective. And there was a lot of healing that took place. And again, I couldn't have dreamed of this when we started, I wouldn't even thought of something like this. But we realized dance is not just about the stage, it's beyond the stage, which I love the title, it's beyond the stage, because you realize this is impacting way beyond the performance. And that's what the beauty of the arts is, it goes beyond, the art gallery. That's just the stop.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, I hope that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Well, a lot of what you're talking about reminds me of, have you ever heard art-based knowledge translation?
I've heard of it, I don't know much about it.
Yeah, so the work of, for instance, Catherine Boydell out of Toronto, so she does dance. So it's all about taking evidence, like research findings, and then translating through art forms to various populations to change perceptions, to raise awareness for it. So it's exactly what you're speaking of. And so that was I did a presentation yesterday that talked about arts-based knowledge translation, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity to expand. It's a growing field in Canada.
Yeah.
And a lot of opportunity for artists, for instance, to get funding to do projects and to connect with researchers in the medical field, all across different sectors. It's growing. So I was just thinking, if that's the work you're doing anyway, that might be an avenue to kind of explore maybe in the future.
And it's interesting, right? We had met with medical people, and but it always stops when it comes to the funding, because they go, well, we can't, and we're maxed out at this grant, or we're maxed out. So it's interesting. We're providing healthcare at a different level, but we're all talking about healthcare. But there's no room, because this is seen as, oh, that's nice, or it's sort of seen as an add-on. What we really need the money for is this, and I get that to a certain degree. I often joke, do you want, when I ask people for money, because we're a not-for-profit charity, I send out the fundraising letters. Do you want to support Motus, a middle-aged white dance company in Canada, or you want to support the dying people in Africa? Well, I go to the dying people in Africa. You know what I mean? We have a story, but the perception is, well, why do you need money, or what, But again, because unless I think someone said this, but they need to. I was just in a session before this. They need to come and see us. They need to experience it, and then I think they would get it, because you just can't. I don't care how good of a writer you are, you can't explain it. It's an experiential piece, and so there you go. So I'm hoping maybe one day it'll get to that, but I'm running out of steam. But I hope I can pass the baton on, and someone else can. Eventually.
Well, seeing like I said, there's a few researchers across the country who are working specifically within arts-based knowledge translation. So I don't know if there's something to be learned from what they're doing and how they're
totally investigate that
marketing themselves. I don't know, but
Thank you. That's great.
Other questions, comments?
I don't know if this is on topic, but I just thought of this. I just was thinking about the passing of the baton, and this is a question for both of you. So, how do you feel about your work continuing when you don't want to do it anymore, or when it's time for you to do something else?
Well, for me, I have a groove in my shoulder from carrying this guitar.
Sure.
And, I have arthritis in my big toe, and at a certain point, it's going to be hard to do this. I would do it every day if I could. I love it so much. I get so much out of it, and I still owe $60,000 on the project anyway, so I kind of need to keep working until I at least pay that back.
Right.
But I've thought a lot about this. I'm a storyteller, right? And it's hard to pass on that story. I think my best case scenario for the disposition of this guitar eventually is that it goes to the National Music Center in Calgary, where they have a big collection of instruments. They're dedicated to keeping them operational, which is important because you stick it behind a glass case and it dies. This thing needs to be handled and held and played and loved and brought to life periodically by musicians. So I know that they would look after that well, and if I could work with them to develop programs that they could then deliver, they already have an outreach and education department, then maybe that's where it ends up. But I'm, hopefully a little ways away from having to do that. That's one thought.
Yeah, I mean, stick me behind a glass window too. I guess that'll help me leave. Yeah, I think the three of us, we've talked about it because it's all about succession planning, right?
Yeah.
And passing on these wonderful things. The lady sitting right beside you on your left, we were just chatting on the way here about this, and she said, yeah, my daughter just reiterated back to me, it's like, Mom, let me play back to you of what your frustration is. So you work 60 hours a week, you work for the first 20 years of your life for next to nothing, and then you get frustrated when you don't find the younger generation wanting to take that on. And we started laughing, and I went, oh my gosh, it's true. And you're talking, and it's actually, we were laughing because it's, because we're talking about succession planning too, and it's like, every dance we've had, and some of them lasted 10, 15 years, but they look at us and they just go, why did you do that? I mean, they thoroughly have appreciated the ride, absolutely, and they think what we're doing is amazing, but I guess it's our baby. So for them, it's a real challenge to actually go, why did you make just above minimum wage and you work 60 hours a week? I think I'll get my teacher's degree. And unfortunately, that's the reality of it, and it's been like this for the last 3 or 4 years. And it's like, so we look at it and go, I guess, yeah, it's like having your own child. You're willing to do all that work because you see the power in it, and you've built a lifestyle doing this, but for asking someone to step into that lifestyle, because it's not a job, it's a lifestyle, is probably, and so there may be someone out there, but again, this is called the SPARC conference, so we're hoping that somewhere along the journey of all these projects, it has created sparks for other people, and that things are happening that perhaps I'm not even aware of. I'm hoping that's happening, where they're being inspired to do whatever in their communities and taking some of the things we've done and are building them or running with them. I'm hoping that happens. I mean, that's the best we can do. I mean, to do nothing would be stupid because then nothing is being done. So better to have these parachute experiences, at least to something happening, and there's some people being affected, which then will ripple out to other people. So that's the hope, even at that level. So even if it's not longevity for 20 years, it'll affect people, who they are, which will affect people. So I keep making it, shrinking the experience down to, it's about people, and it's about changing lives.
My full expectation is that sometime in the future, somebody will do a big casting call and say, if you've ever had your portrait taken with the Six String Nation guitar, please get in touch. And or if your grandparents did, and somebody will reassemble all of these lovely photos taken over a couple of decades, and then they'll say, "Wow, that was a really cool project. Whatever happened to that guy?" And, died penniless. And,
It'll be a bio in the museum.
Yeah. So
get a good photo.
That's right.
A good photo.
But in a way, it's kind of a nice idea, right? That because everybody owns the guitar in these pictures, people turn these into their Christmas cards and all kinds of stuff. That and we encourage people to use them in their own ways. That then these become, this is their identity, this is their ownership of this, and they do something with it, and that's a way of kind of spreading that seed in a way that has its own follow-up that has nothing to do with us.
Joey, is the number 64 significant?
No, that was just the number that we stopped at. So the guitar is made from 64 different pieces of material, and then there are additional pieces in the case and strap. We don't add anything to the guitar, of course, because it's done, but we've added a few to the case and strap over the years. We're running out of real estate there too, so it's not endless, but we just added material from Gord Downey's suits and hat and boots that he wore on the final tour.
Anyone else?
I have
Yes.
a question for Jack. I might have missed some of this, but I know you were talking about like community engagement that your company has done, and it's people asking you to do it. But has there ever been any community engagement that you, as a company, sought out to do on your own?
I think outside of the general.
No, Stouffville for 5 years.
Oh yes,
The
thank you,
theater.
James. Thank you.
Partnered with whatever
Yeah,
the
so
reason.
there was the town we were living in didn't have a theater, and eventually they created one after 10 years of negotiations. They finally built like a multi-purpose center, which mainly is this little theater, 120-seater, like seats go in the wall, and you could use for all kinds of things.
Sorry, where was this?
In Stouffville, Ontario, just north, around Markham, just north of Toronto, about an hour outside of Toronto, 45 minutes. And that's where we were based since 1990. And so the town actually, when we heard about this, then we came up with a 5-year plan to partner with the theater to help it develop and become a theater in the community to get it known. So then we committed to 2 shows a year, and as well as to do their summer camps and all that stuff. So there was money that was supported from a funder that allowed us to do these projects. So we call it Perspectives 1 through 5, and then we did that, and then we had used our annual Christmas Carol where we auditioned local performers and took 20 or 30 of them into our production, and we would do that for a 3-day run. So what we were trying to do is create some tradition in our town, and also some profile for the theater. So we did that for 5 years. So that is one. That's most of them have been SPARC. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I think we usually have to go find the funding. We were here in New Liskeard with the summer fair last year. So we got 3-year funding to actually work with fairs and festivals. So we bought a big circus tent, we got all the funding for that, and it was about sort of rejuvenating, because people we met, and it's usually people who have approached us and have said something like, fairs are dying. You know, once the gray hairs are gone, there's not enough love for fairs anymore. It's based on sort of old traditions. So how can you help rejuvenate it? So it's usually people like that, and someone did, an elderly lady approached us, and there we went. We took a bull by the horns and went, that's fantastic, let's do this. And so we created a whole piece. Every year we created a new piece based on rural agriculture. It was the history of fairs from universally. One was called Animal Tales. So it was about the relationship between humans and animals. And they're 15-minute pieces that we do 6 times a day. We set up our own tent with lighting, stage. And we did that for 3 years, and then we did the Ontario 150, which was a celebration of Canada's 150. But now people have to buy it. So this year, all of a sudden, it's like, we want you again. You still have the funding. Nope, but this is what it costs. So another project that they love, and I mean, I've got quotes. This was the highlight of our fair in years. So they love it, but they have to prioritize with their money, because I've suggested maybe the 10-minute fireworks could go to 8 minutes, and they could use $5,000 of that 2 minutes fire to bing, 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 and then relocate. So I'm suggesting to them how they can fund it and support it. Again, these are projects that someone has sparked. We've got the funding, and we've created the work, and now we're waiting for them to now hire it. And that's the piece that keeps getting stuck. It happens a little bit, but certainly not to the degree of when they get free shows and have everything covered. So that's the piece that I wish would continue. And again, if it was a flop or it wasn't really working, you go, yeah, okay, let's do it. For us, working with autism, it was so difficult. The organization was difficult. They were not organized. So it was a bit of hell work trying to keep that part going. And then working with kids with autism wasn't quite what we were banking on. We really need more high functional, because they cannot focus, right? So they were putting us with really high and severe needs of autism. You know, wearing the helmets and that, but they could not. So doing dance, you want them sitting, you don't want them moving. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for us. So that kind of project you don't want to keep going, because it's ineffective. We're not being effective with what our vision was or our goals. So it should stop, you know. But these other ones should live on. You know, there's something there. So Yeah, well, that answers your question. It's mostly people have asked us, and there was only that one project that we can think of that we initiated it. It's been other people coming to us.
I'm just going to take this moment to remind people that we are doing these portraits over at the Community Hall in Cobalt this afternoon from 4 to 6. We would like to add your lovely mugs to this gallery.
Wow.
Please come
They
on.
all look so handsome and beautiful. Do you make us all look like that?
Oh yeah, this is Doug's, my photographer Doug's genius.
Wow, that's great.
Katie,
Question about the portrait session, actually. Will you take us on a bit of a tour of the significance of each part of the guitar before the session?
For the portrait session?
Yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I don't, this guitar has been, it's priceless, and it's been handled by thousands and thousands of people. I don't like anyone to handle it if they don't know the story. So having an occasion to do the presentation first is really important, because otherwise it's just a guitar.
Yeah.
Why do I want my picture with it? I don't know. Apparently it's a fun thing to do at this festival, so I'm going to totally goof around and not respect it. Whereas if you have a moment where you can share the story, then everyone is so careful with it, and everyone's really lovely about it, and they tell me their stories, and so it becomes something.
How many here are involved in community engagements in the communities, residencies? So most of you. How do you find it on your end? Organizing them, finding them.
money is always an issue,
Money is
yes.
always an issue.
But yeah, it's
Are they long lasting in your community? What's the impact in your community of people like us coming in and
in some ways, we worked with the Dust Dances folks for 8 years.
Right, yeah.
So, which is quite extraordinary, and so we did that over 8 years, and so that's but it's finding that amount of money, even though they're very good at finding money. We also had to find a lot of money, and there's an enormous amount of energy to do that. We have groups of people who are very interested in sort of place-based theater, telling the stories of the community, and so a lot of it's animated by people who are actually there, and then sometimes bringing people in. But it's animated by people who are there, then funding is much less of an issue because people are willing to give their time.
Right.
This summer, we're actually having the Throwdown Collective for 3 weeks as artists in residence in the Halberton Sculpture Forest.
Cool.
No idea what they're going to do. They're just going to create dance in relationship to the 35 sculptures that are there,
Yeah.
and come up with something.
Yeah.
And we've seen work with them for years, and we just we just happen to have access to the money right now, and
Yeah.
so let's see what happens.
That's cool.
And one thing that I think that's great about them is that they know and care about the community because they've been up. So one thing about people coming in from the outside is sometimes you can have your shtick, right? The thing you do that you lay on the community,
Yeah.
and it's so important, I think, to respect whatever expertise, strengths, needs are coming from the community itself. Because if the external people don't do that, then if you're building on those strengths, then there's more of a chance that it'll keep going, right?
Yeah, you want to be partnering with what's already happening.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
idea.
and those guys, they learned about the community they were working there, but they were hanging out and, building pieces based on what they saw. Like, they were listening when they were there, and that was a very
It's a big
special
piece.
thing about them is they came with ears.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first piece that they did was actually inspired by the kids doing flips off the bridge. And there's a little bridge in town, right in the middle of town. The kids do flips off of into the river, and they started doing it with the kids. And
Oh,
I thought,
nice.
wow, this would make a great dance piece. It's like, but this is the only community with a little bridge right in the middle of town, right? So what else can we use? And they came up with the idea of a couch, and then it turned into this whole performance.
Cool. That's
so
great.
so that having artists with the connection to place
Yeah.
is really significant. We've done the same thing with sculptors, coming back year after year and creating pieces.
Nice.
And they actually live in the community and talk to the community while they're doing it.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's a question at the back.
Yeah, I was just gonna to add to that, like,
Alright.
I'm from Ontario Presents, and we have a project around encouraging presenters to do more community engagement, and that's one of the struggles that we have talking about, like working with people from the community and not imposing an outside vision. Is the kind of community engagement that we really want to encourage is basically just building relationships with your community and then something organically coming out of that.
Yeah.
But you can't get funding for that because you don't know yet what the project's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, like,
See a car that's
we
not
literally had a phone call with the Canada Council, and they have a public outreach grant, but 50% of it is judged on artistic merit, and we were like, we don't really know what the artistic merit's going to be.
Of course you don't.
We don't know yet what the project is. So it's just really a struggle.
Catch-22 there.
Yeah, so we're trying to get both presenters and funders to the point where they understand this, and then maybe those systems will change a little bit.
We just made stuff up.
Not that any funders in the room have heard that.
We just we always had a community piece and dust dances, and the funders won't pay for creation; they'll pay for presentation.
Yeah.
So we just named the dance and described the dance like very vaguely, and showed the artist bio, and they bought it. And then by the time it came around, they actually had a dance to present.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was our methodology. It's never
I
worked for
think,
me.
but sometimes
There are
it's
feathers in
like,
the room.
sometimes it's like you want to ask someone to just take the, we were talking about this yesterday in our session, like just take the time to build relationships with the community. And obviously you can't get a grant for that. The organization just has to take the time to do that,
Yeah.
and that's really difficult.
You could eventually do it by hanging in there for many years. And I say that only because of, I mean, we go to Felicity's house when we're here, and we have dinner, and she bakes all kinds of crazy things. We go, so most communities we go to now, as Motus, because I mean, rural touring has been massive for us in the last 28 years, and across Canada actually, but in Ontario we have many relationships, which is fantastic, but it's just built over time. And it's also, you got to get out of your hotel room, so when someone says, would you like to come for dinner, you go, because again, you're meeting the people of the community. And for us, but that's what we enjoy, but not every artist likes that. I mean, some artists are really busy and they just want time out, they leave me alone in my hotel. That's fair enough. So you have to actually be community oriented, I think, and I don't think everyone is.
I think there's a problem too, and you probably all know this, that with artists sometimes, well, more than sometimes, I'll just be blunt, they come with their thing.
Yeah.
And this is what I do. So you have to find artists that are willing to be that sort of community oriented. Not everyone is. Right?
And not every project
Not everyone
is a community engagement project or needs to
That's
be.
right.
Yeah.
Sure. So it's interesting. We our 25th anniversary. We realized we had performed more of our shows. We've had 28.
28 shows.
We've performed more of our shows in Sioux Lookout than anywhere else in the world.
Wow.
We have done more shows there, but they've hired more of our shows. Sioux Lookout. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't go much further except Red Lake, right? So
Yeah, we've done like 10 shows there.
I don't know how that happened. They just
It's the people though. The
Right,
the people,
are so
yeah.
But
passionate.
what we
right.
find as a general rule is when we do communities, if it's possible, and it often is it's what they bring to it is far more important than what we give to them. So so when we work with communities, it's about facilitating them to tell a story in movement or in song, or we don't do sculpture or that too, but it's facilitating them. And so there are some artists out there that are incredible facilitators for locals to do it, as opposed to impose. That's what we find as a general rule works.
When we did our show with the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre in St. Catharines, so they built it around my presentation being the opening act. They had Susie Minnick and the Mandevilles as using my guitar as the second act, intermission. But in the performance pocket that's built into my presentation, so we need to fill 8 minutes, they ran a social media contest locally for who wants the opportunity to play this guitar while it's here.
Yeah.
And this, all kinds of young people did audition things on YouTube. And through Facebook, they ran that as a contest, and the winner had their first break on the First Ontario Performing Arts stage as part of the show. So, I mean, it's a small thing, but it's a way of...
It generates that relationship.
Yeah.
And I think as artists, it's up to us to build the relationships as well as the presenters and people bringing us in. If they don't really want to have you over for the house for dinner, well then of course, it's not a big deal. But we just find that those that are very much into, hey, let's go for a beer after, we have our roots are much deeper, and those connections and relationships have lasted longer. So the Sioux Lookout crowd have been there forever, and every time we go, it's like, okay, well, whose place are we going to? We got to organize the tour so that Saturday night, we can make sure we can, but you do that because so you can have time together, and that's rare, but that's what makes it so exciting, and that's what makes you feel like you're a part of. And someone actually, someone from there, we asked one of the head guys in Sioux Lookout a couple years ago, and he said, well, it seems like the dance community is really building here, and that was the whole purpose of it. He goes, well, no, but the Motus community is building. I went, oh, okay. But then he realized, oh yeah, because they bring us up regularly, we become a regular almost, and so you do become family almost. But it's all through the networking. It's all about giving and taking, and they have to trust you as the artist as well. I've heard many of horror stories from even technicians. It's like, or one presenter brought in a big name. It was like, yeah, that was just too much work. That'll never happen again. Because we can have egos. So you got to get people who really have the heart and desire to develop a community and be wanting to be a part of your community, not like, I've got the expertise, I'll go and do my shtick, adios, pay me my thing, and go, on we go. Okay, so in order to build this kind of relationship, you have to have, the presenter has to have that trust, and you have to have that trust in the relationship for it to go anywhere. So it's taken 30 years for us to be at this place where we can walk in here and you can say hello to Paul, and we're at least a face that they recognize, even if we're not here for a year. So, but that's the beauty of it, though. That's what I love about it. To me, this is what it's about. It's not the flying. And I was just saying to Joe, or I think it was you or someone, I was just saying that urban touring is sort of like, it's like, oh, the reviews and somewhere you hit this in your career where it's like, I don't care what you think from the Globe and Mail. Wonderful to have that, but I'd rather be sitting here with you guys having this conversation than beginning I don't really care about that, because it's about the work, and it's about the impact, and it's about what are we doing to make society better and life better. Whether they can lift their legs up here and unscrew a light bulb and put it back down again. Beautiful, yay! Okay, that lasted 30 seconds, but what's the lasting impact? Well, it's the relationships, right? That's what we're all about here.
So a lot of our funders now are wanting us to measure impacts, as opposed to just metrics. Oh, we had 500 people at the performance, and we did 3 workshops, and 25 kids came. They want us to measure impact. So I'm just going to throw that out. Because you're doing all these things, and just from all your anecdotal stories, that what you're doing really has impact. But any thoughts of, like, how do we measure the impact of what you're doing, Joey, in the 6-string nation guitar and in Motus doing this all across the country? Like, is there a way? Should we just tell a fun? Sorry, should we just tell a funner to just shove it? And this is like
not this one. She's nice.
All the research shows that art and experience is good for you. Why do we need to measure this? Why don't we just do it? Anyway, I'm just throwing that out as a question.
I think they are measurable.
Yeah, okay, so go.
Yeah, I won't go on with the whole things, but I'd be interested in other people. I think they are measurable because at some point we have to communicate that experience to someone who hasn't had the experience.
Yeah.
And there's different ways, numerically, how many people turned up. But there's also reports from individuals who appreciated it, from children to things. So that's a way of doing it.
Yeah.
It's wonderful now, you can quickly videotape people. We've done that at our fairs. You videotape or photographs of the amount of people that you've impacted with the guitar.
But really, the impact of this, though, the portraits look great, and I never tire of looking at them, but that's, 15,000 individuals. The impact is when someone, and I've heard this story a bunch of times, someone goes into a stranger's house and says, "Hey, I have my picture with that guitar," because they printed it off and put it on the wall.
Oh, no, lovely.
And like that's the impact. That's impact. That's
And
somebody said, I want to put this in a frame, and it's something I will never know about except by total accident.
Yeah.
But they're part of the story, and they just realize you're part of the story too.
That's right.
And I think we get confused with justification and reporting. You know, sometimes we get into, are we trying to justify what we did? But that becomes a problem because
Well, there's always impact. I work for an NGO that provides funding in the community, and our board of directors is always like, well, what impact do we have in the community? And a lot of times you don't know what the impact is going to be for 10 or 20 years, right? Because you did this little thing here, and then that went to this, and then that went to this, and then these things happened, and then these people got together. And if you're around long enough, like me, you could tell the story.
Sure.
I was there when we made the decision to fund this little piece here, and this kid then went on to film school and then came back here and started a business and now is working with youth and community.
The long term.
So we can actually show that impact through that. But that's a very, very complicated.
It is complicated, and I find, the whole qualitative, quantitative, because I'm the general manager of the company as well, so, we're both hats, and I have to say it's frustrating, giving numbers is easy. 500 people showed up, or, but when you're doing, like we were doing 6 shows a day, and I had to do impact on these fair pieces, so when the volunteers don't show up, so I'm performing, da-da-da-da, and I'm jumping on the stage, surveys, and I'm just like, by the end of it, like, who cares? We know that people watch this, were amazed by it, or they had such a great time, or, so there does come a point of frustration at a point where you're just like, this is silly, there's so much measurable items I have to do here that I can't even keep up with it. But of course, most people can hire someone just to stand there and do that, which makes a bit of a difference. But for volunteer communities, it's a lot of work measuring impact and follow-up and surveys and online surveys and all that stuff. And yet I get it why the funders need it on one hand, but I keep saying this, there's got to be a point in our career where they go, you've been doing it for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. We know you're going to be effective. We know you don't have to justify why you exist any longer. There's got to be some, but it never happens. We still have to, like we're entry level, fill out all the forms and justify why we exist. But maybe one day that'll change and someone else will get lucky enough to be able to say, yeah, I hit the 15-year mark. I don't have to fill out the page 1 to 9. And they know my impact. Just give me the numbers. Give me the budget. What's the project about? Give me the numbers. And then fill your final report and merge your expenses. I get those are things that are necessities. But the philosophy of why we're doing it, there's got to be a point of, I'm almost 60. My whole life has been doing this. It's obvious that I'm committed to the art and that I have some kind of artistic vision. Why am I justifying again? Anyways, but those are, again, things that you can't necessarily measure but are required. So, yeah.
I was telling these guys before the story about a visit to the MacArthur Foundation office in Chicago, where the application for the Genius Grant has one question. What's your project? That's it. You tell us. We'll decide if it's
A Genius project.
project or not. And done. You're on your own.
I like that. One question out.
Yeah, and it should be at points in your career though that has happened. What is your project? What's your expenses? And then do a follow-up. How did it go? How many people? Like really basic, because we already know the credibility of the company or the artist or whatever it is. It's got to be a point where you're considered a mature artist and you don't have to, again, keep justifying who you are. It's like, this is such a waste of time. We're so busy and definitely not getting paid for that work. So, but I mean, you guys have to report to the government, so they expect all that. So it's just
it's something that not that we have the power, but it's something that we can bring up when we have our meetings to say, okay, this was brought up. Is this something that could be coming in the future?
Yeah.
You say the matured artist or the experienced artist within the department. Maybe that's something.
Yeah. They did a little bit of Ontario Arts Council did it back in the early '90s. I was just new at this whole thing, so I sat in this meeting there. I wasn't quite sure what I was into, but I know even at that time, project grants for artists, for dancers, And I know Peggy Baker still had to give 3 letters of references, and she'd been going 25 years. It was a national thing, Order of Canada. And she still had to, with every project, submit 3 people's, get them to write letters to say she can do this project. I was like, and I was just entering, I'm like, oh, what have I got myself into? You're kidding. I expected us to do it. We'd be going 2 or 3 years, of course, they don't want us to go hold the ground. But now we're in sort of 30, I'm just like telling a time out. Like, come on already. But, anyways, that's another conversation, another round table. With funders, how do we get to Ottawa to be able to get them to change? 'Cause you guys have to report, so you need all the boxes checked. Yeah, it's all down, right? It needs to go to the top, and then let's relook at this. But
It's the accountability. I mean, it's citizens are paying money with their taxes.
Exactly, it's not our money.
Yeah.
It's
However, if research, this is my thing for the take back government. If research shows that that involvement with the arts is going to make people healthier, happier, more vital, so we've already done that research. There's gobs of it.
that's a given.
It's a given. So if somebody applies and they say, okay, obviously they're being professional, they're doing these things, then we don't need to measure the impact because we know what the impact is. Anyway, I think the research already shows that the impact's there. So it's really just, are they being responsible in terms of using the money? And then we don't need to worry about that. Anyway, that's just a little thought we can take back.
It's already being looked at.
Yeah.
They've done a lot of consultation, actually. There's been a lot of consultation groups, and you will see that there will be a lot of change in 1919, 1920. And they're looking at fast track applications to exactly address those.
Perfect.
And they're
You're already on it,
actually-
man. I love this. Let's go.
We're already on it. Organizations are going to be submitting their organization. So we're not going to be re-looking at the organizations. The organization's going to be approved. You don't have to submit your bylaws anymore. You submit them once. That's it. We don't want to be receiving those year after year after year. I've already vetted it. Once you're vetted, you're vetted. That's going to be coming. It's going to get to a point where eventually, it's going to be phase 1, phase 2, but it's going to be, I have to apply for my CapF grant. Oh yeah, that's right. You're going to be able to do it from your smartphone.
Yes.
That's what we're going to be looking at, 2021 maybe. But that's what we want to get to. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to be able to apply, to be able to report. Grant applicants don't have to submit budget final reports anymore. Because we wanted to make it easier for you guys to report there.
Canadian Heritage you don't?
No, it's a
not
narrative
grant.
final report
we still
now
have to.
for grant. Now, contribution agreements, you still have to give us a financial. So we do hear you when you speak.
Wow.
And we want to address those things. So yes, we do take that.
Yeah, that's great. No, it's
Say that
wonderful.
works.
Thank you.
However,
However,
it's time.
It takes time.
Sometimes impact, we do want to know. And the impact is, what we want to see is if we took you away and we didn't fund you and you didn't exist, what would happen? That's the impact that we want to know.
That's a different impact.
That's
I like
a
that.
different
I like
impact.
that. Yeah, but I like
If you
that.
were gone, what would happen?
It's a wonderful life for
That's it. So if you didn't exist in your community, what
Would anyone
But we're
care?
not- yeah.
I don't know if I want to know.
No, but then what would happen
environmental
to
devastation.
to the people that you serve? So put that in your application because we want to know that.
It's not only the numbers that
So it's-
matter.
Yeah,
It's the whole
it's what you
picture.
do.
Because sometimes people will say, well, why are you guys funding them? Okay, if we don't fund them, what will happen?
What takes its place?
How are we helping the community by not funding them?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we
that's
have
good.
these discussions when we get projects, and that's how it's,
The big picture.
yes.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, it
We'll
should be.
fly on the wall and listen to that. It's
Mhm.
fabulous.
Once we
We have
know
come
the
to the end of our time.
Yeah,
Do you have 3 last words to say, Joey?
See you at the community hall.
Okay, that was fine. That was fine. That's
More
good.
pictures.
Jack?
I'll see you at the dance after dinner because we're going to be doing a little fun thing. So
Great.
Oh.
fun. We're going to have fun.
Let's round of applause for our host and for our